Great. So welcome everyone to another Prepare Like a Pro lecture series. Today we'll be discussing about the importance of chess classics and modern day preparation. So I am a firm believer of studying the chess classics, which is studying the games of the past and learning from them. And we can actually use them in our day-to-day chess games in the opening preparation or general plan making middle game moments. So today we're going to discuss as many games as possible with games of Carlsen, actually, with some twists from history. So the very first game we're going to see is a game of Carlsen versus Nodirbek Abdusattorov at the World Rapid Championship. So I can almost assure you that this was not a opponent-specific preparation. While I do not know this for a fact, when players play in World Rapid or World Blitz Championships, they play multiple games back-to-back, and they rarely have even time to go back to their hotel room and prepare specific openings. So in this game, also, Carlsen started with the move b3, which is a quite rare move at the higher level. So b3 was played, e5, bishop went to b2, knight c6, e3. So we do have the Larsen Nimzovich opening, or whatever you feel like calling it. Honestly, you can just call it 1b3, which is a pretty interesting setup, especially in the rapid and blitz world. So knight f6, knight goes to f3, black responds with bishop d6. So far so good, and obviously I will be connecting the dots together in the future, but I just want to focus on this game for now. Pawn goes to c4, castles, and white plays the move d3. So white's just basically developing their pieces in a very calm fashion. So is black. There is nothing out of the extraordinary at the moment. Both sides are just getting their pieces out. Rook e8 and a3. So some of you might be familiar with what white is trying to do. Some of you might not be familiar with what white's trying to do. So let's let the play unfold a little bit. But the point of a3 is essentially white's trying to go b4 and gain some space on the queen side. And in order to prevent that, black responds with the move pawn to a5, preventing any b4 action, at least in the near future. b4 could still be an idea, so could d4 be, but the issue is that black is controlling the d4 push really well, especially with having a rook placed on the e file. So white continues the game with bishop to e2, and black drops the bishop back to f8. Why does black drop the bishop to f8? Because the d pawn was being blocked with the presence of the bishop on d6. So therefore, they either want to play d6 or probably d5 to fight the center and get their light square bishop out of the c8 square, maybe somewhere more active on this diagonal or something else later down the line. So white plays castle short, and black replies with pawn to d5, which was their intention as soon as they dropped the bishop back to f8. After d5, white captures, c takes d5, knight takes d5, and white plays the move knight bd2. So I think we reach one of the main positions of the hedgehog system. So hedgehog system is usually a variation that is played by the black pieces, and the intention often is to provoke white to advance and sometimes kind of ask them to overextend occasionally. But this time white is the one playing the hedgehog system. It's a little bit more on the rare side, I would say, since white doesn't have to be defensive starting off the games. So Black responds with f6. I think that's a fairly logical move, just creating a nice pawn chain, pretty robust, and trying to fight against this bishop on b2. That's a very powerful bishop, and after the move f6, maybe less powerful. White goes queen c2, and then black plays the move bishop to f5. So this is already a little bit of an interesting moment, I think, because when white sees this position for the first time, they could be inclined to play the move e4, which looks like a fork. But the problem is, if white plays the move e4, black will respond with knight f4, counterattacking the bishop on e2. Therefore, you cannot capture my bishop because I'll capture your bishop back, and it would actually be a trade rather than white winning any material. So in reaction to that, Carlsen plays a very logical move. He sees that exact sequence, and therefore he plays the move rook f to e1. So what he's doing is he's protecting his bishop in advance and threatening the move e4. And if he can get e4, he will actually win a piece. So after the move rook e1, the move bishop g6 was played. And here we reached the first, let's say, critical moment of the game. So it is white to play right now. And for the in-person audience, I blanked out the notation part. So the idea is, how do we find a plan with the white pieces here? If you're already familiar with the hedgehog pawn structure, then your life is going to be extremely easy. If you are not familiar with the hedgehog pawn structure, then you will oftentimes recommend the more natural moves. So I think there are a couple of people who knows these games in chat, so that's very good. Although the move suggested was not played right now, but I can see that they know the game. But yes. So rook ec1, queen d1 is suggested. So one of the suggestions is king h1. The other suggestion is like rook ec1, queen d1. G3 plus e4 is another suggestion. Okay, so I'll give everybody some time, and then I'll discuss all of the suggestions sort of one by one with their goods and their bads potentially. Yeah, e4 is also a move. So I do see some players that are familiar with stuff, but some are maybe not. So let's give everybody a fair amount of time. Knight h4 is, of course, a very tempting move, trying to get the bishop. But some of the moves that are being suggested are more on the shorter term rather than the longer term. So when we're talking about plans and like making plans and middle game and all these things, generally speaking, our goal is a little bit more longer term rather than, oh, I'm attacking his bishop here, and then his bishop drops back, then we have to come up with a new idea. So we need a more long-term plan than a short-term plan. And when we say we want to have a long-term plan, that means I ideally want to decide on what part of the chessboard I want to play. Is it going to be on the, and I often like to do this drawing, is that, do I really want to focus on the king side? At least that's the way I think when I think in my games. Do I want to focus on the center, or do I want to, let's try to take a different color, do I want to focus on the queen side? So the chessboard could easily be split up into three relatively equal parts. And just because you're attacking on the king side doesn't mean you cannot include the center. So it could also be a combination of center and king side, or center and queen side. Whereas it could also be just the king side or just the queen side. It's going to be very, very rare that you want to attack on all parts of the board. If you are in such a position, that very likely means you're already winning or something, because that means your opponent has no play. and that doesn't sound very realistic as your level goes up. So oftentimes you pick one or the other, or a combination of center plus a flank. So the number one thing we have to decide is how do we proceed on one flank, or again, it could also just be the center too, by the way. So one of the suggestions in the chat is we do want to break with d4. So therefore, one of the most logical lines is white goes queen rook here, with the idea to drop the queen back, drop the queen to a1, and then go d4. That's one of the very, very common ideas of the hedgehog, and there is nothing wrong with that. Absolutely a very logical plan. Not what happened in the game, though. I think the move will honestly shock majority of players. But before we get to that, let's just address some of the comments in the chat. So rook ec1 and queen d1, well, that is slightly not hand in hand with what we have just done, because if you remember, we just played rook f to e1, and then after bishop g6 moving rook e to c1, that would kind of lose the purpose of putting the rook to e1. It almost feels like we just wasted a tempo. And if we're going to go here, then what is this rook doing in the corner? We really don't want to just ignore a specific piece. We want to contribute with everybody, ideally. And when I mean everybody, I literally mean everybody. So that addresses that, I hope. e4 allows knight f4, not something we're interested at the moment. g3 is possible, but the thing is we're slightly weakening the king. We're not really weakening the king, don't worry. But when we play g3, if the pure intent is to go e4, it's possible actually, but not quite the plan we're looking for right now. So I know this is a little bit of a vague explanation, but g3 and e4 sounds more like a two-move plan rather than a longer-term plan. And when we say plan, it's often like, oh, I want to attack his king, I want to break the pawn structure, I want to invade on the queen side. It's more like longer-term, not like I just kick this knight out and then I'll figure out what to do in the next 5 moves again. So not that either. This would also be interesting, but then he'll retreat. And then, yes, we do get the knight on f5, but how much did we succeed if they kick me out again? So for example, we play this out, they just kick me out, and then I have to retreat. Or I play e4, but we said we don't like e4. And if I have to retreat somewhere, did I gain something? Not really. So back to the game, in this position, Carlsen played a really, really interesting move. So in the chat, the move king h1 was suggesting, and this was one of the first suggestions, right? It was actually the first suggestion, I believe. And king h1 looks like a weird move, but indeed it was not king h1. He played the move g4, and a lot of players would be like, whoa, what is g4, right? Like, if you have never seen the hedgehog pawn structure, if you have really never seen this, and if you are just seeing the move g4, you'll be like, they told me never to advance a pawn in front of my king. I don't see the clear plan behind this. Is this not just out of this world? But Carlsen plays it, it has to be good, right? If you ask it to the computer will be like, it's not that great of a move. But the topic is not the precision of the move g4, whether it's best or not. That's not the debate. The debate is something else, which I will show later. So we're not going to go into all the technical, tactical details of this game for the sake of tying down the classics and Carlsen and modern day preparation. But the move g4, to some, while it might be insane, is actually very, very logical. So black goes a4. He's like, I want to create counterplay on the queen side. And that's exactly falling into white attacking on the king side and black wanting to counterattack on the queen side. They both can't really, I mean, of course you react to your opponent's threats on the flank, but you can't both be sharing the same battlefield very often in chess. So black goes a4, white's like, okay, I'll take that guy, can't deal with and he attacks over there, and also it's just a free pawn. So he goes knight b6, very logical, just trying to grab that pawn. White goes knight e4. Oops, I did jump a little bit. That's sorry, actually no, a4 was not the game, my bad. a4 was probably the best move in the game. Queen d7 was played. I take that back. I think a4 was one of the computer analysis I had, so it's better that I stick to the notation now. So queen d7 attacking the pawn, and then king h1 was played. Now, so what's the idea? Well, the idea is if you take this guy, it looks like a free pawn, but now notice that you're under my bishop's discovery. I can go knight takes e5. And I just took a pawn. Well, we traded a pawn, but now I'm attacking this guy, that guy, this guy. Problems. And also the position is opening up. The more the position opens up, the more black will start feeling the weakness of their king. That all being said, also once we get the bishop pair, the bishops are very powerful in open positions. So the more it opens up, the bishops are going to be more powerful, and so on and so forth. So it just kind of becomes a problem. So black doesn't take it. He plays rook 8 d8. And then white goes knight e4. Planting the knight on e4. Idea to play knight c5 maybe one day. And also there is no f5 because I put the pawn on g4. So everything is kind of coming together. King goes to h8. Rook 8 to d1. Okay, let's just do this. And then bishop goes to f7. This is another moment I like in the game on how to proceed with the white pieces, because we did play g4. Great. We put a pawn there. We got everybody in the game. There is not a single piece of white that has not moved. Pawn, yes, 2 pawns did not move, but every other piece moved. So how do we go forward? How do we keep progressing on the king side? Because we started an attack, but we need to keep it going. So how do we do that? The initial idea would be to go g5. But if I go g5, he'll go f5. Doesn't sound right. And it looks like I don't have that many pieces. If you remember how I was drawing the stuff, when I look at it, I'm like, I only see a knight there and a pawn. It doesn't look very realistic to me, to be honest. So what does white do? Let's consult the chat and the in-person too. Yeah, I see both the YouTube and the Twitch chat. So if you guys have any suggestions from YouTube or Twitch, just shoot. B4 would hang a pawn. That's not quite what we want. All right, there we go. Rook g1. Perfect. Why rook g1? It's fairly simple. We need to bring more pieces into the game. That's as simple as that. All right, knight goes to b6. Now what? What do we do now? h4 is possible too, but the reason we're not going to be playing h4, you will see very shortly. Let me just double check that I remember. Yeah, okay, sure, it is correct. Knight c5 is actually a good move. What's the purpose after, let's say I go here? Push which guy? Yeah, this is actually possible, I think. Here, and then d4. Because now you're trying to open up your queen and everything too, right? So it makes sense. So this is actually a fine one too. But what he did in the game, he played rook g3. He wants to bring the other guy over. So he's really focusing on the king side. He's like, I'm going to bring everybody in. I'm not even going to be interested in any like knight c5 stuff. But knight c5 is a huge idea. It plays a big role in this position. So I really like rook g3. It just shows how focused white is. Why not rook g2? That's a good question, because I have this additional idea that I can utilize down the line. I might be able to just open up everybody all of a sudden, you know. So having that extra idea is always going to be, and remember, this is a rapid game. It's not a classical game. So the players have less than probably like 10 minutes right now. They're playing pretty quickly. Well, maybe Carlsen not, because he knows the ideas pretty well, but a4. The reason he knows the ideas pretty well will be more apparent and obvious very shortly. So a4, he's attacking the b3 pawn. Okay, the reaction is not going to be any different than what we saw before. We just take it out. And then knight goes to a5. So now the pawn is attacked. But not only that, there's also an idea of a skewer. So actually we're going to be doing a dual purpose. Well, we get out of both of them. Well, I can't protect my pawn. We kind of lost that guy in the process. And in this moment, bishop d5 was played, which is apparently a mistake according to the engine. And apparently black had to play the move knight takes a4. So there's, of course, a lot of analysis I did in this position because I was very curious. So a couple lines maybe just to see is, now you can see that the black pieces are a little bit on the queen side. We can call them offside a little bit. They're not really involved in the play. White can play the move g5 and try to break through. And notice that this bishop might suddenly turn into a huge monster shortly. So let's say if f5, white can take here. And again, this is a computer line and they're playing rapid. So we do not expect players to see every single move by move. That would not be possible. So this is some line the engine gives, takes, and then the knight goes here for some reason. And then there are some crazy lines with bishop takes g7 and some checks and some stuff is happening. But the moral of the story is there's a huge kingside attack. So we don't need to go into every single detail of what's going on, why it's happening like that. This is maybe because I was curious. I was just checking. I'm not running the engine right now. This is my analysis from the past. But as far as I see, okay, maybe the sacrifice actually doesn't work. Probably, let's see. Let's check it with the engine out of curiosity. Okay, it does give bishop g7. Yeah, it gives clearly better for black, but again, at the human level, I think this is unclear. What the engine says right now is tough to assess for humans in the middle of the game. So was knight takes e4? Yeah, so the objective eval of the position was clearly better for black to begin with. So again, we don't really talk too much about the engine when we look at these games because the idea is very different. So bishop d5 was played, and then Carlsen goes g5. He's continuing the attack. And after f5, I think this is where he missed like a very, very cute little idea to sacrifice his knight. That would have been insane. So again, it looks like what is going on, right? Because after takes, there is no threat. But the threat is white wants to play the move e4. So let's just make a random move for black. What could the random move be? c6. That's very random, but my idea is to go e4, and the idea is to shut down this diagonal, because if you take, I take, and let's say you go back somewhere, well, all of a sudden now I can take here, I can play f7, I can discover check you, and do all sorts of bad things. So it looks like a slow idea, but the problem is it's actually not that slow. It's coming next move. And you need your bishop. You can't just take this and be like, I'm done, because now this is a threat. So that bishop's very valuable. That's why we are trying to go e4. And if you stop me from playing e4, very logical, I can play this move, and I still will be able to play e4 one way or the other. And notice, let's say, once again, let's say you pass, I play e4, you take. You can never take because of checkmate. So e4 is actually a way I can distract your bishop and not have to, you know, deal with that guy for a long time. So, and if you take this guy, e4 happens. Again, this is some computer line, but it's pretty cool. Takes, rook f1, and it's game over because there's a pin here, there's a skewer there, the queen can't go anywhere. Just resign. So, knight f6 was missed. Can't blame him. It's a rapid game. Here, knight c3 was played. Bishop dropped back. He played e4. And then knight takes a4, knight takes a4, bishop takes a4. Queen went to c3, attacking this guy. Makes a lot of sense. Black retreats, defends the pawn. White goes g6, continues the plan. That's what I like. Like, he's just going, you know. And then opponent goes knight d4, trying to counterplay, at least somehow to try to trade some pieces. Because if you don't stop it, then the white's just going to go all the way. Knight goes here, and then knight takes e2. I am just trying to remember if this was the best sequence, because after knight takes e2, let me just check one thing real quick. I think white had some pretty nice win in this game after. Yeah, exactly. No, this was right. So in this moment, Carlsen played knight f7 check, which is better for white. But again, apparently there was a much better move, which was queen c4, sacrificing the rook. Because if you take this guy, I am threatening knight f7, trying to go for smothered mate kind of stuff. And if you go, let's say, bishop d6, I go rook h3, now I'm threatening mate. You are forced to play h6, otherwise you'll get checkmated. Now I go check and check. And this is a funny position. If you go here, you can do the smothered mate if you like, but the funny thing is you can even do something like this, which is checkmate. So this is a rare one. This is the cliche one, but it feels good always to do such stuff. So it's a pretty cool idea. Unfortunately missed. Knight f7 was played instead. If he played queen c4 and finished it that way, it would have been, I think, brilliant. But queen takes, pawn takes, takes, and then they reached an endgame. Okay, black had to capture with the rook for some reason, not the human way. He took it with the bishop, and then he played bishop g6. Again, black's making a lot of mistakes. I'm assuming he has no time at this point. I don't really remember the exact time situations and everything, but what happened in the game was black finally made a mistake. Rook takes g7, and then he resigned after rook g7. The reasoning behind is that if you take it, I just take it, check, discover check, pick up the rook, and that's game. So, okay, you will be like, all right, what does that have to do with any preparation? Like, it's just Carlsen played some really cool game. So now we're going to look at a game of Bobby Fischer. He played this against Ulf Andersson. I don't have the exact year on top of my head, but obviously it was played before Carlsen played his game. So the tie I want, the connections I want you guys to all make is Carlsen's knowledge of this game is what guided him to play that game in the World Rapid Championship. And again, when you are playing in the World Rapid Championship, it's very, very rare that you have, let's say they're playing round 14, it's very, very difficult for you to go up to your hotel room, open up your computer, search your opponent's name, and then like prepare from scratch. Of course, Nodirbek and Carlsen, they have played many games, so I'm pretty sure they know each other's profiles really well. They don't have to do that, but you don't have time to go check your own files, so you have to have everything within rather than go do some preparation on your laptop. So once again, the game started with b3, and I guess there is no surprise on that. So and the nice thing is you don't have to play b3 to get to the hedgehog pawn structure. There are various different ways that you can get into the hedgehog pawn structure. So before we analyze that game, I just want to show you how does the black pieces get to the hedgehog pawn structure. And this is the most traditional way of getting it, honestly. So let's say, honestly, something like, let's say this plays out. Queen c7, bishop here, knight out, let's say castles. Again, I'm not really like paying too much attention to what both sides are necessarily playing. I'm just making some moves. Here, here, and then here, here. Let's say some couple moves here, there. Again, don't be like paying attention too much to the details, but if you look at it, it's exactly the same pawn, like piece structure. And next time you see this position, you'll be like, oh, I can go king h8, rook g8, g5. So at least now you have an additional idea rather than just sticking to like rook c8, rook e8, and all these queen b8, queen a8 ideas, which is not bad. There is nothing wrong with it. g6 or aka g3 and the other one, still possible. A lot of times black players play that and then route their bishop here. I have plenty of games here with the black pieces. It's quite fun, to be honest. So that's one way you can get to this position. But okay, let's go to the game. b3. Someone's asking in the chat, can we get to the same position with 1g4? Very likely not. You're not going to land there. But good question. So b3, e5, bishop b2, knight c6, c4, knight f6, e3, bishop e7. Okay, so in the last game it was like knight f3, bishop d6. But honestly, you're going to realize nothing's going to change. Castles, queen c2, rook e8, d3, bishop f8, knight f3, a5, bishop e2, d5, takes, knight d2, f6, castles. And then in the last game that we saw, this was the exact same position. Nodirbek played the move bishop f5. In this game, instead, bishop e6 was played. So just thinking about it, right? The exact same position or a very, very similar type has happened between two great players in the past. And the knowledge of Carlsen, just knowing this and probably knowing that game, I mean, I'm sure he knows many other games that include the king h8 and g5 idea, but knowing this exact game, he's already like semi-prepared, basically. Because, of course, he has insane memory, if you think about it. Like, he maybe saw that game when he was growing up as a youngster, and then he just kept it in his mind. Or maybe he just saw that game once again before the tournament, and he was inspired to play it again. I don't know. Again, I am not in his brain, so I'm not sure what the right phrase would be, but he basically knew that game, hence he was able to prepare without necessarily utilizing the engine or anything else, because at the end of the day, he played it in a rapid game. So when you play it in a rapid game, you don't really need to play everything too perfectly, because mistakes will happen due to the lack of time, and more like lesser the time, more the mistakes in everybody's games. This is normal. So he doesn't mind that. So we have a position in front of us, and as soon as I will ask, what will white play? Everybody knows the correct move all of a sudden, right? If I change the order of events, if I gave you this game at the beginning, just like the last one, we would start seeing suggestions like rook c1, rook e1, rook d1, rook e1, rook d1, whatever, g3. All these things would be very natural. Or even things like d4, you know? These are very, very natural. But now, the first thing you sort of see is king h1. And that's kind of the similarity I want you guys, everyone to kind of see. So king h1 with the idea, obviously, to go rook g1 and g4. It's kind of funny that I'm saying obviously, but now it's obvious. Once you see one time, and the nice thing about the humankind is when you see something, it's very like if you see something similar afterwards, we can adapt so easily. It just makes a lot of sense. That's a good question, actually. How about we answer that? How would you compare the practicality of studying classic games to that of modern engine eval lines? So that's a great question. So classics were essentially what we build our fundamentals on. It's like, imagine the very first bicycle invented. Was it perfect? I would assume not. Right? I think they have developed better technology over time for the modern bicycles or car engines or cars in general, planes, whatever. You can just go on down the line. Same idea. So without knowing your history, it's very difficult to come with novelty. So you don't want to add on to something, you don't want to necessarily like reinvent the bicycle. You get the ideas from them, you can make it better, but the players of the past definitely knew something. So you're basically using the correlation, you're basically using their ideas, and again, they might have been wrong in some things, but you will notice that majority of the things they did was actually pretty accurate. So the reason we study over the classics and not like, let's say, any other games, or you can of course follow the modern world, and in fact you should, but when you're looking back or you're looking current, there are billions of chess games that you can search from. And if you include all the databases, the online databases, the Grandmaster, the Master databases, you'll be like, I have no idea what to study. So how about we just study the greats of all time? That will make my life easier. At least I can build a fundamental, and then I can take what's good, take what's bad, and if it's good, I don't need to change it. If it's bad, I can modify it, alter it for my own needs. Because now we have resources like engines and other things, or many different things. So, I mean, engines to start with. So that will help us. But the fundamental ideas never changed. Like this idea of king h1, rook g1, g4, if you ever run into like a grandmaster and ask them this position, if they don't suggest you the move king h1, then I will be very, very surprised, because they know it. The fundamentals never changed. Out of curiosity, is king h1 the engine's top choice? No. Currently it's showing d4. Maybe I can increase into multiple lines. Still not. The computer says, the Lichess computer right now, 0.3 for white after the move d4. And after king h1, he says 0.0 equal. So the position was equal, still equal. Nothing changed. 0.3 is not an advantage that a human being can utilize. It's really not something you can use. 0.3 means nothing for us. So king h1, queen d7, rook g1, rook d8. Again, now the moves are easy to guess, to be honest. And then knight went to e4, queen goes to f7. I'm just going to read this comment because it's pretty long. From my personal experience, going through classic games were much more interesting because they had the human element with flaws. Yes, to take advantage of that were practical. Yeah, the problem is, that's correct, and there's a lot of practical human element to those games. The slight issue is, as your level goes higher, the players are more engine-like. They tend to find the best move of the computer, because as we have progressed, the defense also got better with time. Like, humans are more capable of defending tougher positions just because of all the technology and all the tenacity and everything has also developed. So classics, you should learn the fundamental main ideas, but with utilizing the modern software too, you should know how to defend and also expect your opponent to defend when it might look rough for them. So isn't it black's pawn structure on the king side? Yes, yes, of course. I mean, if these pawns were not like that, we couldn't go g4, g5. Essentially, there's a hook on the f6 pawn that makes me able to do this business. If the pawn was on f7, I can't even think about doing that. That's a good point I made in the chat, of course. So the pawn structure, well, to kind of take a back step, the pawn structure always determines the plan. So if you think about the order of events, it's always control the center, develop your minor pieces, put your king to safety, and then decide on the plan based off of your pawn structure, not the opening. A lot of players make the mistake of finding a plan based off of the opening. The opening has nothing to do with the planning because it's not how you got to a certain point. It's where you are. So if you think about it, when you ask the position to the computer doesn't need the past. It will not be like, hey, is this from a Sicilian or is this from some random opening? The computer doesn't care about that. Since it doesn't care about that, that already gives you the hint. You don't need to know what opening it came from, but you care about the pawn structure. Pawn structure is a very, very advanced concept. Not very, very. It's an advanced concept because there are many pawn structures in chess. And I am not referring to pawn structures like isolated pawn, and they are also pawn structures, but I'm referring to a little bit more complex ones like this one, which is hedgehog. And I mean, isolated pawn and all that is very complex too, don't get me wrong. But there are so many pawn structures which you can get to from different openings. So it's a better idea to know your pawn structures rather than your openings. Essentially, that's kind of where I'm getting at with the preparation part. So good point. Makes me even tie a lot of things together. So queen went to f7. I think everybody guessed it. g4. g6. I mean, everyone can play like Fischer after seeing Carlsen's games, or vice versa. If you saw the Fischer game, you can play like Carlsen because you saw the Fischer game. So what did he play? Rook g3. And like the moves are so natural because it almost feels like you're seeing the same game twice. It doesn't matter which order I showed this to you guys. The order is like, I mean, this is actually a pretty impressive game by Fischer because there were no engines and there were books and so on. Of course, he knew about this idea, but I think it's just impressive in general. So bishop went to g7, rook goes to g1, no surprises, and then knight went to b6. So this guy is being attacked, and then knight c5. So in the previous game, I was telling you the knight c5 move is actually a pretty valid one, and here you can actually see that. Knight c5, bishop goes to c8, and this is a kind of cool moment where how does white try to break through? That's actually a nice question to ask. I played the Scheveningen or Scheveningen for decades, and to be honest, I never would have considered king h1. My candidate moves would be knight e4, d4. Yeah. So now you added an extra idea to your arsenal, let's say. Of course, you need to make sure your opponent's pawn structure complies with everything you want to do, because you don't want to just go king h1 and g4 and then be like, hey, I saw this on a YouTube or Twitch stream and then I'm doing it and then I lost. Don't tag me if that happens. So I am not taking any credibility, like any, you know, you don't point fingers at me. That's what I'm trying to say. Do not try this at home if their pawn structure doesn't help. So here he wants to open up the file. A d4 is possible, yes, it's a good move. But he played, d4 is pretty good. He played knight h4. I like the creativity of the move. Like, he's obsessed with the g file. He just wants to plant a knight to f5, sack that knight, just whatever, open up the file. In my opinion, to be honest, I still don't understand the decision making by Ulf Andersson. Why would you not play king h8, for example, right? Like, he clearly wants to play knight f5. So this is one question I have in mind, and unfortunately I don't have an answer to. So this is where the whole classics and human error, like, I can assure you, if you play knight h4 in 2025, you will see king h8 instant. Even if you're playing a random friendly game, you will see king h8. That knight is not coming to f5 because it's too obvious of an idea. That's why. But in the game, knight d7 happened, knight dropped back to e4, and then same stuff. Why not king h8? Knight went to f8, and obviously knight found itself on f5. So this is something I would be taking with like a grain of salt. Be like, knight would not come to f5 in a modern day game. But anyways, we're not discussing the specifics. We're discussing more like the general plans and ideas and stuff. Bishop went to e6. Knight went to c5. They're playing more like a game of cat and mouse, I think, at this point. And then the knight went to e7. This game also, the rest is pretty nice. So Fischer takes on g7. Was this in my 60 memorable games? It has to be. It has to be. So this game is relatively famous, but if you think about all the Fischer games that are famous, I don't think this is the first one you will mention, right? It's not like the top 3. At least not that I think. But anyways, that's a different debate. And finally he goes g5. And I really like this, like opening up the king. Like, this bishop looked like a sad bishop for a long time, but now all of a sudden it's like the main actor out of nowhere. Knight goes to f5, rook goes to f3. Again, the pressure is coming, building up. b6, takes, king h8, and then he took the bishop. And again, the same like bishop pair business that every grandmaster likes to say. At least I think every grandmaster would like to say that. We love bishops. I mean, you can see that, right? Which is amazing. d4 he plays, trying to do this kind of business. And then Andersson's like, okay, just do it. Bishop goes to c4. He has something in mind. Plays the move d3. Counter play. Takes. Sack. Here. 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 And here. Okay. This is a good moment. Let's do some tactics now. We prepared like a pro, but we need to win games like a pro too. You can't just keep preparing. You need to be ready to do it in action. You have seen it, but I'm 99% sure it's not in 60 memorable games. Possible. To be honest, I don't remember every single 60 and everything that is included. Somebody tell Anand about the bishop pair. He knows a lot about the bishop pair. He has many games where he used the bishop pair perfectly. So don't worry. One of the greats of all time. I'm sure he knows what he's doing. One of my favorite players in the world. So it's funny because I have one of my earliest coaches has worked with Vishy Anand during Anand's youth, so they have done a lot of end game work together. This is from stories my coaches told me. So, and he was the one. He was the one who taught me all about bishop pair. I mean, many of my coaches told me, but he really was heavy on the concept of bishop pair. So, oh yeah, I mean, of course, it's a choice, right? You might enjoy knights more, bishops more, but bishop pair in an open position is something else. So yeah. No, he's so one of the suggestions is sack the exchange and then jump to g7. That's what he's saying. So it's first take the knight and then rook g7. That's a pretty cool idea. But the line you would have to calculate if you're going to sack the exchange and go rook g7 is what if the queen drops, let's say queen f8. What if he drops queen f8? Because your idea is very clear, right? You want to go here, and if they take, you take. That's cool. But what happens if they drop here? That's the important questions, because you do have an amazing bishop, but if you play the move f7, they will take your rook, right? So queen h4 is a suggestion. That's interesting. That's an interesting way to put the game at risk. You are never safe. Everything, suddenly the tables might turn against you. All of a sudden, if you go here, you're checkmated. So it's not over until it's over. And if you play e4, I think you can just take the rook and slide over. And now I'm threatening queen e4. I think it's the end of the road. I mean, you can go f3, but then you just lose your bishop. And this is the worst case scenario for black. There might be better moves, but this is good enough to make white resign, I think. So that doesn't look pretty good for us. So we need to be a little bit more careful before sacrificing away all our pieces. Yeah, I was looking at the back. Concern me. Yeah. Complete disregard of opponent's counterplay is a very, very common one. You are not alone. A lot of players tend to forget about their opponents and just focus too much on themselves. And the number one tip I think I give is prioritize your opponents more than yourself. If you do that, then you will actually excel in chess way faster than you think, because the idea is essentially always searching for your opponent's counterplay, always searching for their idea. And if you find yourself not being able to find their ideas, put yourself in their shoes. So you incentivize yourself to being them, and that's why you will be able to find the moves. When you are the other side, you have no choice but to find the best move. Because, well, at least try to find the best move, because every chess player's goal is to find the best move in a given position. So I always joke about this, but this is unfortunately and fortunately true. If you always play the best move in a chess position, you will never lose a game. It is the simplest thing you can say, but it's also true. So just keep that in mind. The goal is always the same, finding the best move. Of course, we fail a lot, but when you look at the games of grandmasters, they make a lot of top moves, right? And then they make one mistake that costs the game. They don't make like 20 mistakes in a row. They don't need to do that. They play most of the game perfectly, and then one mistake and it's lights out. So that's the thing. So the position is still this one. We sacrificed the exchange. Let's continue from here. But I think there was a question that I might have missed, and I can't see it anymore. So if I didn't answer your question, just let me know. Some same suggestion works for relation prior. That's true. Um, mhm. I have a question. I have heard Anand Aronian saying something like 85% of the time you're thinking about your opponent moves. Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, a lot of the times we're thinking about opponents. Yeah. Um, yeah, of course. When you're playing a time game, it's kind of hard to do that back and forth, like thinking from your opponent's perspective. It gets overwhelming, it gets tiring, and it's not easy. But just having that at the back of your mind and letting yourself grow while thinking about that will help. So because for a lot of players, this is gonna be unlearning many things too. Like you knew about some things, but now you're like this guy on stream. He's like, you got to focus more on your opponent. But just try to think from all of your losses. I'm assuming a lot of players in this chat and in this room lose a lot of games, including myself. Just look at most of the time why you lost the game. You will realize it was 90% missing your opponent's move. Because if you saw everything they were gonna do, then you would probably not fall for anything. So is queen e6 working? That's great. So I think somebody found it. So yes, we can sacrifice the queen too. And if they take, which they don't have much of a choice, they could give us this check, but the equation doesn't change. I can block. Actually, I can't block. My bad. This is actually mate. This one you have to be careful. So opponents block like ideas, right? So you can't do whatever you want. You have to play e4. So even I went wrong for a second there, because that checkmate is not something you anticipate. And if they take your queen, now you play f7. And there is no way to stop checkmate or win the queen or whatever you want. Because if you go here, now I go here, check on the other side. And that's pretty cool. So I don't know if Fischer missed this or if he just didn't want to risk it. That's a different thing. So, and if you take again, I just push the pawn, and that's it. You check, counter check, that's it. And if you take the rook, I guess you promote to a rook at this point. Just why not? If you want to just have a little bit of fun, you can do that. So this didn't happen in the game. Should have happened. That would have made this game even. I think if this happened, then a lot more people would have known about this game, in my opinion, because that's just too nice. So bishop e5. If it's not in my 60 memorable games, maybe that's the reason. Maybe not that sacrifice. So he played bishop e5 and then he played h4. So later on he won the game, but I think the rest of the game is not that exciting. At least in my opinion. Like I think as the closing screen, maybe we would like this to be on the board. It just looks cooler. So yeah, that's kind of how I would like connect Carlsen's knowledge of classics, and there are many other examples. In fact, maybe I will continue on the same topic next week because I truly believe in the value of this. I had like 6 games in hand. I showed only 2. So there are many examples of Carlsen. Oh, that game was played up. Yeah, okay, that makes sense. Well, I was making a joke. So either way. So yeah, Carlsen has amazing knowledge of chess in general, but also knows the history of chess very well. And I think that shows sometimes why he is who he is. So yeah. So thanks to everyone attending, and I will surely see you all next time. So take care.